Awesome. Good morning, everybody. Kind of a bittersweet morning as we prepare to wrap up this day together. It's been a fantastic couple days of learning and connecting with each other and with doctors. And I got a nice little note yesterday from cute little Lauren. And it's addressed to the Heterotaxy Conference. And I did ask her if I could read it to everybody. And she said, well, that's what I wrote it for. So I wanted to share this with everyone. And it says, I like being a heterotaxy kid, and you will love this poem. Heterotaxy is the best, never say it's the worst. Come and have some fun, play until the day is done. And I felt like that just embodied our conference for these kids. It has done my heart so much good to see these kids watching little Carson lean over to Easton today and say, we should come to the kids' room today. We need to play some more before we leave. These kids get each other in a way that you won't find anywhere else. And these, as parents, as caretakers, we do the same. And that's what we wanted to focus on as we round out our conference is really our caretakers. We're the ones that take the brunt of all of this. We're the ones that hold everything together, that takes the hit, have to figure out how to not just get back up ourselves, but help everybody in our families get back up. And so we have Amy Clifford here to share with us how to take care of our caregiver. Amy?
So happy to be here today, just to talk about a little bit of what I've been doing in school. All right. Right, so first, just to share a little bit of my background. So my undergraduate degree was in recreational therapy, and child psychology was a minor study that I did. And does that work better?
Probably not. Maybe.
Yeah, so I started off as a recreational therapist, and I interned at a skilled nursing facility that was a pediatric nursing facility in San Diego, attached to what was then San Diego Children's Hospital, now it's Brady's. So that's how I started, was that I did want to work with medically complex children and their families. Never anticipated that my fourth child would be born with heterotaxy. All of a sudden I went from somebody who worked with families who had children with complex medical conditions to having my own. And so when my son was born, I used a lot of my rec therapy with my own older children and with how I interacted with them and how we just faced hospitalization and medical and everything. I just never thought that I would be using my degree as a parent as well. I regret a lot of things I said to families because I just was this toxic positivity of like, everything happens for a reason, until parents like, you should still be happy, you still have your child and all this stuff. And now I'm like, oh boy, I was really young and really inexperienced. So then, parent of Christian and my other three kids. Christian was, he was 2.5 when he went in for a G-tube surgery that went wrong. And he ended up needing to stay in the hospital to get a heart transplant. He was there a year until he passed away. And that year changed so much for me and my family and my kids and everything, because we learned so much as a family how to work together and how we could get through things. And then after Christian had died, actually one of my goals when my husband and I got married is that we would foster medically complex children, because my goal was to get children out of group homes and nursing homes that I had worked with and place them in families. But we agreed that we would wait until our kids were all school aged until we did that. And after Christian died, my husband pointed out that Lucy, our youngest, was now 6. So he said, we had always talked about doing this. Lucy's 6, so let's start the process. And started sooner than we wanted to. Some people joke about like when babies come early. We're like, ours came like 6 months early. So we ended up connecting with a little one that was in heart failure in a hospital locally that was going to go to a pediatric nursing home. And that's how we started fostering. And we've fostered several kids that are multi-systemic disorders. And so I saw the system from a totally different viewpoint. And I remember talking with our social worker, like, oh my gosh, this is a lot as far as like drama and just how difficult and how just awful everything was. And she was like, this is 80% of my job. The other side, you just never saw it. And then also I'm a court-appointed special advocate for kids in foster care as well. So I have been like part of the case for kids in dependencies that are medically complex or fragile themselves to advocate for parents getting their children reunited with them. And now I'm a Master of Social Work student and I've done 2 years, so I joke I only have my MS, not my MSW yet. And what I've been able to focus on is the same thing of families with medically complex children. And I really work on studying the impact, not for the individual actually, but for the relationships within the family. So like parent, child, parent, partner, parent, other children, and then the family unit as a whole. And so that's what's been really cool is I've been able to just like focus on it. And then the latest thing that I've been doing is perinatal mental health peer support. And I started as an internship and then they hired me. But what I do is when parents have a child that's going to be hospitalized or medically complex, and they feel like they need peer support within the mental health system, I get connected with them and then I work with the bereaved parents as well. And so I'm sorry, a lot of my focus on this presentation is on perinatal mood and anxiety disorders because that's what I work with. So. Okay, so personal difficulty experienced by parents and caregivers starts in the perinatal period. So what's the perinatal period too? Pregnancy or a year after delivery, okay? I call them PMADS for short, that's the abbreviated term. So if I say PMADS, like, okay, I mean, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. So here's an explanation of it. Let's hope this works. Oh yeah, and my daughter illustrated this book for me.
Perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, or PMADs, are the most common complication from pregnancy. Despite being highly treatable, only half of those with the diagnosis receive treatment. As someone who's experienced PMADs with each of my 4 children, let me see if I can illustrate it for you. Pregnancy is a bit like treading water. It takes work and effort, but for most, it is possible to keep your head above water. But some people have additional life stressors making treading water even harder. Things like pregnancy complications, financial difficulties, a personal history with mental illness, or a lack of supportive relationships or community acts as weights. Parenting is like you're still treading water, but now you've got to keep this tiny human, your home, and other members of your family above water too. Financial strains and or career demands leave little time to physically and emotionally heal and adjust. Often well-meaning people will try and make suggestions to help the struggling person. Just try and get some more sleep. You're gonna miss these days. You certainly have your hands full. When people struggle, they think the fault lies with them, that maybe they aren't a good enough swimmer. But in reality, it comes down to how much the individual is asked to carry alone. 1 in 5 birthing parents meet the clinical diagnostic criteria for a PMAD. For people of color or those living at a lower socioeconomic status, the rate is even higher. PMADs are highly treatable. Since there's no single cause of PMADs, treatment is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Treatment can include medication, psychotherapy, or psychosocial supports, or it can look like a combination of any of those options. The trouble can often be accessing these supports while treading water. The Warm Line service through Perinatal Support Washington was started by parents who experienced PMADs and never wanted another parent to feel alone and not know what to do. They help people connect with resources, such as finding a therapist or medication provider who specializes in perinatal mental health and accepts your insurance. They can help find different peer-facilitated groups or they can offer individual, extended peer support while the Warm Line participant works on finding their way back to shore. The Warm Line wants people to know you are not alone. Relief can begin with a simple phone call by dialing 1-888-404-7763. Text and email is also available by contacting Warmline at perinatalsupport.org.
Okay, so, I mean, obviously it just pertains to Washington State, but you get the idea. The reason I wanted to share the video too was to really explain how we as a society really believe in independence as like the paramount, or like the highest goal that you can achieve, right? As a person is like, I'm independent, I can do it all on my own. But actually, everyone is interdependent. And even people that are at the very top, they have people who are dependent under them. They employ people, even if like you're a super rich billionaire who does it all on their own. I'm sorry, someone mows your lawn, someone cleans your house, someone has all these things that do for you, but they feel like they can do it all on their own, but no one actually does. And so the other part of it is that we as parents too compare ourselves to other families that are dealing with less stressors. Okay, I'll be legit, less stressors, okay? Like for example, how was it to pack to come here for you guys?
Starts more than a week ahead of time.
Start more than a week ahead of time. Well, not if you're me and you have neurodiversity. It starts like 5 minutes before, but yeah, it starts way ahead of time. And I'll tell you, I was laughing because I was thinking about how hard it is for me to pack. Because you know, my youngest has meds like 3 times a day, and you know, my kids have meds and stuff like that. But like, I was pulling out the driveway, and then I was like, "Oh crap! I don't remember grabbing the refrigerating meds." Pull back in the driveway, go check, and up like, well, I like opened the car and checked. I'm like, of course, I forgot the refrigerated meds. Go to the fridge, grab the refrigerated meds, run back out to the car, pull out again, make it a block, and then realize, oh crap, I forgot her emergency G-tube because she's got a permanent G-tube, but I also have to carry a balloon one, especially when we're several states away, because if I blow like or need a replacement, I have to have it pull back in. I mean, I travel with her medical paperwork, but I also have to travel with like legal paperwork too when I travel with her outside of a certain area of the reservation too. So like a lot of stuff, right? But I think too about how I'm often late. Okay, that's my neurodiversity. But also how I will like get so hard on myself for like just not picking up and going to do things like I used to. But I also have 2 children with autism, right? And so like social situations and big groups and going places, never, ever, 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 ever just thing. And I still want it to be like it's not a thing. It's a thing. It's not good or bad. It's just a thing. Like it's neutral. It's just how our life is. And I try and ignore it or suppress it to act like I'm a super parent. Because like how many of you have been like, I don't know how you do it. You're so amazing. Like people tell you this all the time, right? Like, oh, you guys are so incredible. You're so inspirational, right? What that does is it does, I think, 2 things. And you might think maybe it does other things too. If you think of it, let me know because I'm just talking. But what it does is it makes it so you are different than everyone else in a way that you aren't able to relate with them. And because they think you're so amazing, you can't share how you struggle. You can't say, oh yeah, we've done all this, but there are days when I'm just bawling my eyes out because I just want to be able to go somewhere. I didn't want this. I don't want this anymore. I don't want to keep doing this, but because we're super, we can't really let them see. And if we tell them how it really is, they just go, oh, and then the conversation is over. I'm seeing some nods. Yes. All right, makes sense to everyone. Let's see if I can go to the next slide. I just hit this. No, I don't want to push it again. Although it was great. Lucy does joke that I got an A on that project. Where's her A? And I wanted her to redo the pictures for this, and she said no. Come on, Lou, please redo the pictures. So the reason I bring it up, so you remember on that slide, it said it's 1 in 5 birthing parents, and then it's 1 in 10 birthing parents experience a PMAD. Okay, so this is the reason that it's super important for us. For NICU parents, it's 20 to 30% higher. And then for SICU or CVICU or PICU, whatever it is where you're at, it's 25 to 50% higher. So the fun part, this is a cool way to phrase this, but the fun part of PMADs is that it improves with time. Most people, I think it's like 90% of people or so, within like 3 to 5 years will improve. So other forms of mental health are chronic, but the truth is most of what comes out during the PMADs is actually something that was just like a high functioning or a low boil level of mental illness stress that was already there. Like you're already kind of anxious, you already were kind of teetering on depression, but never really struggled too much, never needed to see anyone, never needed to med, never needed to do anything for it. But once these big life stressors hit you, you tank, right? So that's the other hard part, is that it's probably already there. And I bet most of us as a society, we all have some kind of level of it, right? But because there's such shame and stigma around it, we don't talk about it. Because we are super parents, because we are independent, we suppress what is going on inside. Because honestly, it's survival, right? There's no time to work on us because we got to keep that kid alive. Yeah? So this is the part that I wish I had thinned it down. So in my study, what completely floored me is that the severity of an infant's health or length of stay in the SICU does not have a direct correlational relationship to the severity of a parent's mental distress and or health. Does that make sense? So you could have a kid that is in there for a long time who has a very severe condition. That doesn't mean you automatically end up with a very severe mental health condition. I was talking with one of my participants I was working with, and we were talking about PTSD and the difference between her and her husband on something. And she was like, I have to have PTSD because I just went through this super traumatic experience. I was like, not everyone who experiences trauma develops PTSD. Legit. Not everyone that goes through these very stressful experiences has that severe of a reaction to it. It has to do with like early attachment, other life stressors. There's so much, it's multifactorial, it's really complex, it's really complicated. But it's really important to think about how like sometimes we'll really focus on the parents who had it, what we would do like the worst of the oppression Olympics. And be like, yeah, but my kid only had a short stay, or my kid doesn't have heterotaxia with a heart involvement. My kid, only has to take as many meds or doesn't really take many meds, or my kid is doing fine. I shouldn't have any problems. Does that make sense? It's not like you earn it. It's not like it's not a direct relationship. It just happen together. We have more of PMADs because of our unique stressors, but it doesn't correlate to the severity of it. Does that make sense? Okay. You guys didn't know you're going to school today. So 50% of cardiac ICU parents reported symptoms of clinical depression with a strong correlation to experiencing parental role alteration. What's parental role alteration? You can't dress your baby after they're, well, think about it, a lot of people can't even hold their baby after they're born, right? I did not have a prenatal diagnosis. Christian actually wasn't diagnosed until he was 2 weeks old, which flipped people out. I took a single vet baby home with heterotaxy with no idea that he was. because his APGAR scores were the highest out of all 4 of my kids, and it was the easiest pregnancy. So he was nursing, he was at home, he was like, I kept saying something was wrong, and we tried to bring him in a couple times, they didn't catch it. It wasn't until his 2-week appointment when they put a pulse ox on him and he was 60 that they're like, something's wrong. They took his first x-ray and they're like, his liver, I mean, everything's not where his heart should be where it is. That's when we realized that we had heterotaxy. So, because it's not my own lived experience to know what it's like prenatally or to know what it's like to give birth, I only know from what I've heard from people. But like where I am in Seattle, the parents, especially when they're out of area, they have to come stay in a hotel and then they deliver at the University of Washington Hospital, a lot of times C-section, and the baby's transported to Seattle Children's where they're separated right away until the parent who had the C-section is discharged, then they can go be with the baby. Did any of you kind of have a similar experience like that? You're separated? Yes. Separation from the baby is like one of the highest mental health corollaries. Because think about it, that baby's been inside you all that time. It doesn't feel natural to be separated, right? All those people, you don't get those first moments. Think about all the equipment that's on the infant in the beginning, even after the surgeries. One time we were walking around or step down on the floor, and I had Christian with me, and he was older and he's opinionated. And we were walking past this room because we were just walking that clinical unit, and this baby was just howling, just screaming. And this dad was standing over the crib, like, it's okay, like just trying to talk to the baby, like, it's okay. You know, we walk by and the baby's crying, and then we walk by a second lap, and Christian goes, just pick up the baby. And he didn't say just said because he's just bossy, right? And then we just keep walking because I'm like, let's talk to the kid. And then we don't hear the baby crying, and then we make that third lap, and what do you know? Dad's holding the baby over the crib because he doesn't know how to walk away with all the leads on it because he's kind of scared. But it was that parental role alteration, right? Because normal situation, you're gonna get handed that baby, you feel like you're gonna break it, but there's not leads. This baby that we just had open heart surgery where their chest was open, you know, all of these things. Because of those experiences, because you are relying on monitors and staff who are experts, you're no longer an expert. And the parent doesn't feel like they have a role or if they totally fit. And then you go on and you're like, oh my gosh. I mean, Christian was my 4th. I had worked with kids with tricks and G-tubes and all those things. But then to have a kid that I have to weigh every night and take their pulse ox and report all the stats and the interstage period, it was really stressful, right? So that's what parental role alteration, and it is the single highest explanation of why parents end up with more stress. So the key to for the research and for the units is to figure out how to minimize that and how to help parents. And what's our role in the HC, right? Is we talk with parents who are pregnant or just had their babies, and we ask them, you know, what are some cute headbands or what are cute leg warmers or things like, give them ideas of how to dress their baby, give them ideas of, you know, what to do when they hold the baby, show them how they can still have that parental role while in the hospital. That's what we can do because we've lived it. An increase of psychosocial resources, including individual and community connections, directly correlate to a positive increase in the reported quality of life. Ta-da! That's us. Did y'all realize that? We can be that connection, right? As I'm doing all these studies too, I realized that when I was in the hospital, I started like this closed Facebook group, not to be like exclusive or like whatever, but it was just people that I knew had kids with heterotaxy, and we have walked each other through so much, and we could vent and we could be honest and we could be authentic when no one else got it, because even within heart communities we don't fit in. Because how many people have to go to the hospital when your kid has a fever, right? How many people have to worry about the other things that come with heterotaxy? Like, well, everything. There's so many different, our kids are so unique. And I think that we are put in a unique position because we realize that each child is unique. We can sit with people with different experiences and relate to it. Because we can be like, I know how it feels that my kid has something different. I can sit with you with your child having something different. So parents of hospitalized children face increased physical isolation, especially if they're hospitalized away from home and they feel disconnected from their peers in similar parenting stages, even when returning home. Is this your experiences, you guys? When you went home, did you feel like you didn't fit in with other parents that had babies? Yeah, I've seen those. Okay, I don't know about online stuff, but
There.
they're there. Yes. Oh, is that, I had this calculator, is it like 10,000% or 100,000? It's a lot of zeros.
I don't even know.
Yeah, absolutely. And so because I am in perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, there are specific support groups that address mental health. They have found that NICU parents, we're not even talking SICU, we're not even talking heterotaxy parents, don't feel like they fit in within those support groups. I've like connected with my local like parent organization and support groups and did not feel like I fit in all of the medical kit. And that's even within support groups that are supposed to help special increase needs. We don't fit in. That's why the HC is so important. Yeah. Okay, so what is treatment of PMADS? Okay, first of all, it's highly treatable. You know, it is. It's probably, that's why I was talking with some psychiatrists and they're like, this is my favorite one to work with. It is so highly treatable. It has different medications and different treatments than general mental illness. But again, people improve on their own. If you do nothing, like 5 years, you're gonna improve. But it can be accelerated in how quickly you can improve and heal. So ACOG, which is the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, recommend that treatment comprises of psychotherapy, psychopharmacology, and/or psychosocial interventions. Not and or. So even just connecting with other parents in a Facebook group or making friends is actually an increase in a psychosocial intervention. No, Allie's making faces, probably because I'm like, Allie, we did it. All right. Less than 50% of people diagnosed connect with treatment, and for us, it's even less. So now they are handing out these screenings to parents about how are you feeling. They give them at well child appointments, they give them in the hospital, and so people are getting these and they're realizing that something is wrong, but only 50% of people that are formally diagnosed connect with any treatment. Right? It's highly treatable, yet only 50% connect. Okay. For NICU parents, I can't remember, but it was like 50 of the 50. It's just dismal, right? SICU parents, I looked at it, it was even worse. Any guesses why? Yeah.
It sounds silly, but I remember telling myself, I don't have time to go find somebody because then that means I have to risk not keeping my baby alive.
Yes. So I'll repeat it because the mic didn't go. Because Nick, you're not running around with the mic. I'll sum it and tell me if I got it. You said you didn't feel like you had time because you had to keep your baby alive. Is that about par for the course for everyone? Yes, and because children are hospitalized, we don't even make that 6-week follow-up appointment after we had the baby. And that's also, the obstetricians have a lot of training in looking for these, and we don't connect with them because we can't get to those appointments, especially if we are further away from our care. Like think about it, if you were only in the hospital 4 weeks, you delivered somewhere and then you go back home, totally different provider, you don't connect. But again, it comes down to the patient and the focus of all the care is the baby, not the
Yeah.
parents, not the family.
And that's what Sarah's saying, the exhaustion.
Yeah, exhaustion from Noah's appointments and not wanting to, no, yes, to another appointment. Now, with COVID, one fabulous thing is that we can do telehealth appointments more often. One of the incredible things is like what my organization does is we connect people with therapists. 95% of the therapists that we connect people with that take their insurance are telehealth. You can get telehealth that works with your insurance. You can have it where you don't leave the house, you don't have that germ exposure, you just have to have the time. If you're on the unit, you can ask for a quiet room, you can ask the social worker, I need to connect with a therapist, where can I go to do my therapy? And they will help you connect with it. It's there, it's possible, it's a lot more accessible, but we need to get over that, it has to be in person, and I don't have time for myself. The other thing that I love for the HC is that a study utilizing peer support between veteran and current NICU parents demonstrated a decrease in perceived stress and PMAD symptoms. How many of y'all were helped by hearing another parent's experiences? Yeah, Allie's nodding, because I remember. Yes, because you just want to know, I think my one caveat that I have, this is me venting, okay, is that when someone says I'm pregnant, and we all share the success stories. There's a lot of us that don't have the success stories, but the truth of it is, you're not alone. We are here. You are this baby's parent. We will get through it together. What was that?
Just the internet.
Oh, the internet is more.
It's fine.
All right. So, what are the costs of untreated PMADs? A lot. You wouldn't even know this, but it is a lot. This graphic kind of explains it more, but it's more than just I'm struggling personally. You don't connect with your child as well. You don't connect with your other children. Marriages fall apart, or partnerships fall apart. You struggle to think. You struggle to function. You struggle with your employment. And remember, PMADs are not just the birthing parent. It's both, right? It's both parents or caregivers. Then there's all these risks to the baby, which I didn't know. So also disclosure, I had PMADs with each of my pregnancies. I got diagnosed after my first, and I started medication with her. And it was really dark and hard. But I started medication after each of my pregnancies. As soon as I delivered, I never had those symptoms again. And I only had to stay on medication for about a year. Now, this is the fun part. With Christian, I had to stay on medication for 2 years. Why do you think that is? Higher stressor, higher everything else. And that's the other part of it, is that just anecdotally based on me, I think it is so much more stressful when you're dealing with all of that. And I think this is a super common thing, but we don't pay attention to it because the focus is on the baby, right? But what I didn't know is that I had it during pregnancy. I thought it only happened after I delivered, but after I started working in perinatal mental health, I was like, oh crap, because I called myself princess pregnant because I was always super anxious, super grouchy. My kids and husband would hide from me. I was always like, plan, things have to be a certain way, and I would be yelling and I'd be super angry. And wouldn't you know, I had preeclampsia with every baby. I had inductions. I had higher medical intervention, which is also directly tying into PMADs. I also was on bed rest with all my kids, which also disturbs your mental health, right? So I would start bed rest at like 28 and then be on bed rest and just angry at the world. Had I known that it was happening while I was pregnant, I would have had a better start to when the baby was born. And I might have reduced the amount of intervention that was needed for the birth. And the babies that are lower birth weight, they have more complications. Not saying it's a direct correlation, but you know, or is a causation, but it can't be a correlation. Make sense? So it's a bazillion dollars of how much it costs us, not really. But this graphic, I'll just stick on slides, so you can go look at it. But it goes over the cost nationally of untreated PMADs. I only know the ones like for Washington State, because that's what I've written papers on, but this is a national one of just how much it costs us as a society to not treat it. It's pretty high. So, what are the costs associated with raising a child with high needs? Okay, this is the other thing. So we're thinking about the weights that we carry. There's like the financial weight that we carry when we have another child in our family. Okay, now we're adding an extra child with the extra, right? So these are the costs. People will help, like, is the medical bills paid for? Yeah, most of the time. Or people like, I guess what I'm trying to say, I don't know how to say it eloquently, is I see GoFundMe's all the time for people within our community. And I've also seen other people judging, like, why do you need help financially if your medical bills are paid for? Oh, good gravy. Okay, so everyone thinks about the healthcare costs that we have, right? If you qualify for Medicaid or state, yeah, it's paid for, but not fully. So we pay for the cost for diagnosed treatment, managing complications of the condition. But how many of us have had to go seek opinions from other providers? How many of us have to give medications that aren't covered? How many of us just medical costs that are not covered even though we have insurance? Right? Capitalism, medical industrial complex, these are big buzzwords that we throw around in school. So then there's the direct non-medical costs. Okay, a lot of our children will end up with a 504 or special education services. I must say that when the one doc for the adult, I can only remember his first name,
Rhoda.
Broda, yeah. He was like, well, we just tell him to get a college education, they can get health insurance. And I was like, do you realize the correlation with time on bypass, right? With executive functioning and learning disabilities? Just get a college education. Okay, yeah, but it also is indicative that our health insurance system is so broken and ableist that it ties into work productivity in order to qualify for health insurance that will truly cover you, right?
Yes.
So that's why I say special education, therapy costs, and I'm talking about like physical and all counseling, and then transportation costs. Good gravy. How many times do we drive our children everywhere, right? Then we have higher routine expenses. One thing I laugh about a lot is that, like, I was super into couponing before I had Christian. Like, it was a sport for me. Like, I had these baseball card holders, and I would like plan out all these shopping trips, and I would. Jenna is shaking her head no.
No, I can't do it either.
She can't do it, but I did because I was a stay-at-home parent and I had the time, and that's how I like helped contribute. But I was like following sales and planning and everything was at home. Like our routine expenses as a family was so much lower. And then Christian, like how many fast food meal sacks? How just buy it, whatever. I did not coupon anything. We enrolled our kids. My kids were homeschooled at the time. We enrolled them in year-round Montessori school. That's not cheap. All of just, every streaming service. Heck yeah. All of like virtual learning services, like all of these extra expenses that we do because we don't have time. And we're trying to give everyone in the family to try and meet their needs. When you don't have time, super expensive. The other thing is that the loss of employment income is huge for us. Okay, so we miss time from work. So there's like the actual time that you're not there. And then there's a productivity loss while you are there. Are you really there? Like after Christian died, my husband really struggled in his practice to be able to be focused and to actually do it. And that's like people will help pay for a funeral. And they'll, I'm so sorry, but they don't realize like grieving parents, we can't work very well because our brains are done. They're so maxed out. So I'm talking just about grieving, but we are all grieving. death and non-death losses. Same thing, we're not the same as we were before, not good or bad, it just is, yeah? And we need to acknowledge it. Okay, so I talked about, I gave you guys a handout. Ally, what did you do for the online course?
They have virtual copies.
They have virtual copies. Okay, so I wanted to talk about something called an eco map. Okay, so this is something that like you guys do with like environmentalism or different environments, right? Like, oh, an eco map of like how the animals and the water and everything like interact. What I'm actually talking about is a social eco map. Okay, it's kind of a different concept. We don't have to do this per se right now, but I'll kind of explain it. So what it is that I don't know how to explain it. Basically, we're all connected. And it's an exchange of energies, positive and negative. And that's what eco maps really help you see, is where the positive and negative energies are exchanged. And we exchange energy within the micro level, which is just like our personal individual relationships and things that we interact with personally. And then on the meso level, which is like groups that we belong to, or neighborhoods, or our community. And then the macro level, which is like systemic and organizational interactions. What is important to know is like, we have our interactions, and then every single one of those, like, it should be like a super complex spider web. This is really simplified. But each of those things have other interactions. So like, for example, with me and my husband has his work, he has his parents, he has his people. He could have a really bad day at work, come home, take it out on me. None of that happens, but it's called triangulation, right? Like something bad happened, and we triangulate of the yin yang with our children. Okay, we are stressed and angry about what is happening that takes our time and energy with our kids. But we don't take it out on the kid, we take it out on someone else or something else. Make sense? The other thing that blows my mind about eco maps is that they talked about we are impacted by things that happened when we weren't even in the room, so to speak, or even alive. We are impacted by decisions and the way that systems were organized, and we have zero control over it. Makes sense? Okay, I'm gonna try sharing something as like a graphic. But if let's see what happens. I can pull it up. Yeah. Maybe. Not tech savvy.
Do you want me?
I think I can share it. Okay. This is an example of an eco map. So how do I make this? You can see it better though.
Just scroll it on your screen.
No, the problem is the bar is right there. There you go.
You can zoom it out a little bit. Go in view.
Yeah, it's all blocked right there.
And then your zoom there, right there.
I'm like guessing.
Amy,
Yeah,
it's the bottom right corner.
Go there.
There you go.
okay. Because I just have that zoom bar that's like blocking things. So
Yep.
this is an eco map. You guys kind of have the same thing in front of you. I don't know if you guys online can see it too, because it's just so small. I don't have the best vision and it got worse with school. But you can kind of see, I took it by micro, meso, and macro levels. And this is before Christian was born. Like, okay, this is maybe TMI, but my husband and I loved each other before Christian was born, but we did not like each other. We were in like individual relationships. I was mad, I was pregnant. Again, you see the connection. Homeschooling the kids, and he would go on hunting trips and be gone. And I was mad at everyone and doing more than I thought I could do. And we were just working two separate lives. He was providing our income and he was helping in so many ways. I didn't even see it, but we didn't relate to each other at all. Like, you know, he thinks I remember it worse than it is, but remember, eco maps are my perspective. It's your perspective. It doesn't have to be how they say it. Then I had my kids and my relationship with my parents my best friend, couponing, and then my relationship with extended family, church community, my neighborhood. I was really involved in something called Moms Club, really loved it. And like I was in a preschool co-op and I had all these friends and I was like on the board of the preschool. And I was really involved within the homeschooling community that we were in. Then I had some fights with public education. My kids were in public education, but because of, I didn't know at the time, neurodiversity and other things, it didn't work for my kids. So I felt like it influenced me a lot, but I had no influence on it. My religion, not just like my church community, but what I believed in and how I practiced. And then all the isms, right? Sexism is a big one for me within my religious community. Classism, I thought we'd be further ahead financially. And that's just within there are so many people that have others, right? All the other isms. I didn't. Those are just the ones that I had experience with. And then just my intersectional identity. I went from being a professional recreational therapist to when I had my first kid and I wasn't treated PMAD, I couldn't go back to work. I tried and I couldn't do it. And I just thought, oh, I can't be a mom and work. But the truth was I wasn't treated and I ended up having more of a mental break later. Okay, so it kind of helps you understand arrows from you towards the things have to do with the energy that you put that way. Positive energy can be a solid line. Checkers lines are negative, and it can change in strength. Now, I didn't have time to speak, but I can do a slide for it later. I wanted to explain how it changed, because ecosystems are always developing. When we hit a time of crisis, things that we put energy out to that don't give us as much positive back or that give us negative back, we pull out. I've heard it with a lot of people, they feel super guilty, oh my gosh, I didn't know about my cousin getting that job, or my friend had this going on in their life and I have no idea. I'm not a good friend. No, you're actually closing down your ecosystem to be smaller because you need more positive in than you even put out to be in homeostasis. So homeostasis is a state of balance, but it doesn't mean exact balance, not the same in and out. So when you are having all those increased needs, decreased sleep, less capacity, you need more positive in than you ever did. And we feel guilty for it because we feel I should be able to do this. No. Does that make sense? This all makes sense. And when I ask if it makes sense, I should clarify it's not because I don't think you guys are smart. It's because I don't trust my ability to communicate. But I wanted to really demonstrate that I pulled the number of connections that I had after Christian was born, and the amount of positive coming in was a lot higher than I was able to put up. And I've talked to parents as peer support when they have a child with different needs, and I'm get off of that dang preschool board. Stop the volunteer positions. Stop all those extra things. The truth is it gave you a lot of positive, but you don't have the capacity. And I really talk a lot about capability versus capacity. Capabilities have not changed. You are still the same person who can do the same things. You just can't do it now. There are ages and stages and phases, right? Even if you just imagine you had quintuplets or something. You're not doing the same things that you did before, and everyone would expect it, right? And people say, oh, you're super to do it all, but I feel we get the most frustrated when we're trying to do things that we did before we had our kids and have it be the same way. It's not the same. It won't be. They're worth it, and we're worth acknowledging the extra load that we're carrying. Does that make sense? Yes. So with the eco map activity, you can do it later. You can use colors, you can be nerdy, you can make it any way you want. But the purpose of it is to think about the connections you have. I on the flip side of the worksheet, it kind of goes over different levels. So you can kind of brainstorm. The one that people don't see the most often are those macro level. But hello, healthcare, the medical industrial complex. Our interactions with them are decided way outside of our control. What's paid for, the school system, just how ableist we are as a society, all decided without us being present. And we're impacted by it. And if we acknowledge it, doesn't mean we fix it. And there's nothing wrong with acknowledging things. It's just important to know that we are carrying that and that we're impacted by it. Because if we recognize it, we also are like, oh, this is why I'm feeling the extra strain. It's not because of me. I was reading one thing. I mean, I read lots of stuff. But let's see if I can pull it up. I don't know, sometimes I've been in school and it's really odd to go from being someone who works with families to being a family to reading about us. I didn't know I was someone that fit within this thing. I just thought it was me. But yeah, okay, so I'm just gonna read. This is story time. Pretend you're in school, but you don't have to pay as much. Don't get me started on the cost. Okay. About a quarter of families report a loss of income due to the demands of providing care for their child with special health care needs. Families in all but the highest income brackets can quickly exhaust their monetary assets, such as savings and lines of credit. Hello, our savings were gone. As they struggle to meet the expenses of caring for their child. Such families often have typical middle-class lifestyle when their child is diagnosed, and thus are strapped with middle-class financial obligations, such as mortgages, educational loans, and consumer debt. In working to meet these ongoing obligations while attending to their child's medical needs, families find themselves facing significant financial hardship. In a recent study, medical debt was found to be the cause of 62% of bankruptcies in the United States. Families with medically fragile kids with higher incomes are often invisible to both individual practitioners and policymakers, in part because they tend to suffer in silence. I was reading it, y'all, I just about fell out of my chair. Okay, and I also recognize that, like, we come from college educated families that's middle class, and we were in a different spot. But because that too, I got hit up with a lot of people like, didn't you have savings? Why weren't you more financially stable? Why weren't you ready for this? Full disclosure, after Christian died, we sold our house to pay off our debts. And it's not the medical debt, because medical was covered. Like, I think he was over a couple million in his hospital bills, but it's all covered. But all the costs of raising a child, he was only 3.5. All of those accrued costs of the higher financial burden, we had to sell our house to pay it off, and we're still renting. So, and it will be, oh no, I think it's 7 years or 8 years. Yeah, 2016.
Seven this year.
Bad, remember this calculus, I'm stressed. All of this time later, I'm still financially paying the price, and people don't even understand the financial cost, not the emotional and everything else cost. Okay, is this all making sense?
Mhm.
So if you want help on your ego maps, or I like doing it with people where I interview them and then I write it out and we do it together. I can do that with anyone. If you want to do it, I can do it on Zoom. And we can go over them. But what is brilliant with it is that once you start seeing where your energy is going and what energy you're receiving in, you start to see where you can make some changes to take care of yourself. And I think the first step is really just acknowledging that I have the same capability, but I don't have the same capacity.
We call it bandwidth.
Bandwidth, there
We
you
don't
go.
have enough bandwidth for that.
Nisha, say it again.
We call it bandwidth. I can, and that's something that I had to learn the hard way, is to just say, I don't have the bandwidth for that. I'm totally capable of doing that.
Yes.
But I do not have the bandwidth to do that at this time.
And we define ourselves on what we are capable of. But really, it hasn't changed.
And it's really empowering to be able to look at something and say, I don't have to take that on.
And no is a full sentence.
Yeah. It's totally empowering to be able to say, I just don't have that bandwidth right now. And people get that.
And you say bandwidth, oh, I love this, this is a life hack. Yeah, agree with it, perfect, I like
And
it.
sometimes it's hard to admit that you can't, that you don't have the bandwidth.
Yeah,
Like especially for men, it's hard to
Mm.
admit that you're not strong enough to deal with that right now.
it's that toxic independence that we have bootstrap society, and it's also reflected in how we fund things. More comments? Yeah,
I am a proud advocate of seeking out, mental health intervention. We were at a hospital that did not have any access for parents in crisis. And I asked the chaplain, I asked the social worker, and they're like, I don't know where to go, call your insurance and see if there's somebody you can go to. And
I will link a video which is laden with profanity. If not your thing, don't. And if you do, put in headphones so your kitties don't hear it. It's from Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, but it talks about the mental health care system and how like you can look through a list of providers on your insurance and you will call and like none of them are accepting new patients. So like that's why services that like we offer are amazing, because I actually call providers and confirm that they have availability before I even connect people with them and make sure that they take me. Because you don't have the capacity to do all that.
exactly. Well, on that note,
Yes.
this is many years down the road, and I have a lady that she's open for me to go to whenever I need to. One of the things she said that was very eye-opening for me because, I kind of hit this low in 2020 when the world hit a low, right? And he said to me that whole feeling guilty for asking for help, like we moved to this neighborhood and I met like 4 or 5 amazing families that were saying, let me know how I can help you. And every time I asked for help, I was in tears with guilt.
Yes.
And he said, give them the gift that people feel when they're excited to give people gifts. She said, when they can help you, because they're saying that because they see you need something. When they can help you, they feel good about helping you. Don't forget that part. It's not like, oh, great, the Blooms want me to go grab toilet paper from Costco again. It's like, they just ruined my life. It's not that way. It's, oh, let's grab this for them, we'll drop it off, and I'm sure that's gonna help them. It's like, you have to get. I keep saying that in my head now, because it's like, things are better, but I still need a ton of help. And I'm giving them the gift of feeling good about helping.
Giving them the gift of helping. That is such a great reframing. Another way to think of it too is if a friend called and asked you to pick up toilet paper that you knew was struggling, you would be so there. You'd be so ready. And so I often tell parents, imagine that you're not you and you're someone else in the same situation. How would you feel about helping someone else? Like, I would go do it. I would absolutely do it. And it's like, stop this internalized ableism where we feel like we are not worthy of help because we feel guilt for not being strong enough. And the truth of it is we know how we feel inside about what we're going through, and it's guilt provoking, right? We're not that super wonderful, perfect parent, and we really struggle with how we really feel about ourselves. And so the first step, I talk to my kids a lot about like me realizing that I have neurodiversity and learning disabilities, was just to be open about it and to stop making myself have to do things the same way as everyone else. And that's how I start with internalized ableism, and I talk to my kids about it, which is how I try and pass it on to them. Comments or something?
You've got a good question here. Rachel's question.
Yeah, so it says, how do you guys graciously tell people how they can really help? Yeah, so one of the worst things that people say is like, let me know if you need anything. Okay, super crappy, because honestly, we can't tell anyone. I think one of the first things to do is like, I separated it from myself directly and making it in like an email or a Google Doc where people can see and you don't watch the reactions to it.
Mm.
So you can list off things, I could use help with this, I could use help with someone mowing our lawn, I could use help with somebody taking the kids for a little bit, and to put it on a doc that people can see. Because one of the hardest things is repeating it over and over and over again, and then feeling rejected when people can't help in the way that you want. The other thing to realize is that people that offer to help, and you say how you really need help, and they don't help in that way, they are not helping you, they're helping themselves.
Mm.
And to that point, like,
Oop.
there are times in my life that I honestly could not think of how people were helping.
Yeah.
I was doing good to put one foot in front of the other and get through what was on that, my take that day. So oftentimes I would turn it around and say, what are you willing to do for me? Ooh, and because there was times I need somebody to watch my child, and
Yeah.
like, I'm not comfortable with that.
Oh, yeah, I know your
That's
kid.
an empty, that's the empty promise and, or, offer to say, well, how can I help you?
Yes,
So I would just turn around and say, what are you willing to do? And then I'd be like, oh, I can stock your freezer full of freezer meals.
Yep.
Great, I can throw those in a crock pot, and when I leave in the morning for the hospital, and eat them when we get home. Very helpful for me. I never would have come up with that on my own, somebody else did. So I like to just turn around and be like, hey, what is it that you can offer for me?
what's also super helpful is we all have friends who are super organized and they're like the organizer. When you hit those times of crisis, and we also really, really need to fight the definition of what a time of crisis is. It isn't a hospitalization. It isn't the really bad stuff. Sometimes we can hit a crisis with something that's small and we don't know why, because hello, it's cumulative. Because we eat stress for breakfast. Why does this one thing set me off? Why am I in bed? The other thing to really emphasize too is that it's really important to know that after you get back home from a hospitalization or a really awful experience, when life gets back to some kind of normal or you hit your stride, you tank. And it doesn't make any sense because your kid's alive and you made through it and everything is okay. It's because you finally have the capacity to start processing it. And your brain's like, oh, let's start thinking about what happened. And you're like, no, you're done with it. We're gonna move forward. That's time to process. So be really, really prepared for these times when you just tank and it doesn't make sense. But you turn to somebody who's the organizer and they can organize people. You can also ask a friend and be honest and say, I can't even think of how I need help because I'm just so frazzled. Can you help me think of how I might need help and how to make that so other people can see it? And you can make that person a point person. When I was in the hospital too, it's super, super important. Like you get all the texts and everyone wants to know. You either put on a Facebook page where people can just go to it or some kind of social media, or you have an email, but do not have people texting you. Because then you're carrying their weight of how they feel and they're asking you to comfort them about what's going on with you. Like, oh, I'm running out of capacity. That's exactly why. The other thing that I have learned to say to people is, I'm not ready to talk about what's going on, but I need to know that our friendship is okay with me being less present and not able to talk about it. I need you to trust me that I will tell you when I'm ready and I will come to you to talk about it when it is time, but I need you to trust my internal healing process and pace. Because everyone heals in their own way and in their own pace. Like some of us need to soak and marinate in something before we start working on it. Some people just like check this and get to work. And some of us aren't ready and we put it off until we're ready. And I really truly believe that everyone has the own ability within them to heal. And it's really important to recognize that because you are not healing anyone. They will get there in their home. Our job as support and companion and friends is to name any little impulse or movement towards healing and name it, acknowledge it, and bless it. Hey, I saw that you're doing this. I see you working on it. I'm really proud of you. I'm here. Not, oh, I did this and it worked. Or you should probably think about this. No. If they ask, you can tell them, but it's like one of the hardest things is just to be there. The healing power of just being present and listening is greater than you solving it. Because it also says that you believe that they can solve it with support. And you're there to support that way. Does that make sense? Okay, because I'm a nerd. I did something that I'll share really quick. I did something for work. I'm a dork. I thought it was funny that we had Independence Day, so I made up like this big nerdy doc about interdependence. But the reason I was pulling it, let's see, I'll just put one thing to that. Like recent studies emphasize that loneliness and isolation is both a symptom and a byproduct of perinatal mental health disorders. Make sense? It's both. But I'm gonna read the quotes because these are things I was like, oh, I have a quote of these things. It says, we are wired to connect. We grow through and toward connection throughout our lives. We do not use nurturing or loving people to fill us up, to prepare us to separate and then stand alone. There is not a cutoff on our need for connection ever. It is not a sign of weakness that we need others throughout our lifespan. And the other quote that I'll like jump down on, I love it. It says that isolation is the glue that holds oppression in place. And then I have like nerdy things of like how to connect with people. Just stuff that I do. Any thoughts or comments so far? Going off the rails, but I planned.
I think one of the things when you're talking about identity that's helpful to label when you kind of get plunged into the heterotaxy world and your capacity and capability start to have a wide gap, what that does to your own sense of self and your own sense of self-image when you're used to thinking of yourself as a person who, for example, I'll use for mine, Serafina often was not medically stable, so suddenly I thought of myself as a reliable person. If you handed me something to do, it was always going to get done. You were going to get my 100% best effort, like nothing less than that. And then I had to view myself as somebody who couldn't make plans. I couldn't suddenly volunteer to be that person, not because I didn't want to, but because I realized in this stage of my life, I am an unreliable person. So to go to thinking of yourself as somebody who's, you know, this is me, my identity is somebody who is a reliable person that you can always count on, and having to shift into thinking of myself as somebody who is, I am not reliable anymore. I am unpredictable, and kind of what that does to your own sense of how you view yourself when you look in the mirror, and how that impacts your mental health, because it shifts the person you thought you were in ways that don't always feel good. Even as you recognize the necessity of that, and you understand that that's a trade-off you are certainly willing and need to make, you still carry that with you that entire time.
It's back to the internalization. Absolutely. And like the other thing to really reframe it is like, this is a time of healing. Like anyone just had a major surgery would be like, yeah, they can't do this for this long. And somehow that's okay. But our time for healing needs to be viewed just as important, and needing to say that like, I am using all of my capacity right now for myself, and I am worth that. This is one that I heard one jokingly. You've heard me like, that's a big one. The circle of kvetching. I will do better in making these slides, like, I don't know, with links on and things, and I'll share the slides because I don't have the link on it. And I'm not even crediting the person. If I was in school right now, I'd be busted. Comes from a lovely, lovely article. Okay. So, or they also call it ring theory. So the person at the crisis is at the very center. And then you go out on the rings with your relationships. So like your kiddo is in the middle. Then you right? And your immediate family that surrounds the kid. Then extended family, friends, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're each further out in the circle. I use this a lot too, when you've hit a time of crisis, to explain to people how they need to interact with you. So the way it works, comfort in and dumping out. So your kid who's in the hospital and frustrated and ticked is gonna vent everything to you. Okay, you are not looking to your child to comfort you. Which my kid comforted me, so that's part. Yeah. It's just how it works. And reciprocal relationships, yes, it does happen, but they choose. I'm not asking them to do that. Okay, when your parent calls and asks or tells you about how they're having such a hard time, that your child is in the hospital and they are so stressed or they're crying and they're a mess, and they ask you to help them, no. Tell them to talk to their spouse. Tell them to go talk to their friend. They go to someone further out from the center of the circle to get their comfort. Because the way it works is we all lean in and support the person at the center. The important thing to recognize is that everyone, because we're so interconnected, is affected by it. Absolutely. Even your neighbor who's like freaking out because they haven't seen you and you didn't put the garbage can out or whatever, like they are frazzled and upset because we're connected. But it's not our job to comfort them. And it's hard, but you kind of gently correct them of like, yeah, that is so hard. Don't fix it or anything. Be like, you can, if it's someone that you know well, I can say, you should go talk to so-and-so about that. And you guys can talk about it. I just don't have the bandwidth to deal with that right now. I recognize that you're impacted, but there's two parts to that. One, to say it. Two, to like legit like go with it. I am weirdly obsessed with the YouTube channel on tiny houses. Okay, this guy has the most soothing voice. It has the same sound effects, it does the same things. It's one of my like self-care things. I watch them. Could I ever live in a tiny house? Heck no. But the thing that happens over and over again is that these people custom design these little houses around what they love and what they're interested in. And they talk about how they have so much more resources now that they're not stretched so thin. And the thing that they say is, I have room for everything I need in love and nothing I don't. And so I'm like, I am a tiny house. Your issues and your thing is, I can tell you I don't have bandwidth, or I can just be like, and then my job is to get that out of my tiny house. My tiny house does not have room to carry whatever it is that they're going through, and it's not, I don't have the room to deal with what they are going through or even think about it. I have to just let it go. And as a person who always helped everyone else and was like in everyone else's problems, it's really hard when I'm like, I can't help you right now. But you don't even have to say it, but it's also a real big challenge to actually like let go of it. This all making sense? Okay. Okay, sympathy versus empathy. Okay, I'm gonna share a video, maybe.
I talk about this all the time with people, support in, vent out. And I just wanted to say, like, we've got a little sidebar chat going on over here while you're
I actually
talking.
need those sidebars.
No, with all like the virtual people, and we're just,
saying.
no, it's perfect. That's why I'm just bringing it in, because it's not in the official chat, just about how it's really validating just to hear this being spoken out loud, because a lot of us have felt this and don't know how to verbalize a lot of what you're saying. And I think you had talked about having a central place, like a Facebook page, something like that. And I know a lot of us use that. I found for me, as someone who also, I take after my mother. I love to be in people's business. I love to be like, you know, I'm capable. I can help you. I can help you process this and that and the next thing. But having that Facebook page and then letting the people, it's usually, I find the people that are at the next ring from me that are most likely to get it wrong.
Yeah.
They're most likely to, well, to get it wrong, but also to get it wrong in terms of they go the wrong direction. because they're the next closest, and so sometimes they go the wrong direction.
Such an interesting and true observation.
So I find it helpful before a big surgery, before a big thing, to let the people in that next ring know. I will be posting on the Facebook page. If you need information, get it from there. If you text me about it, I may or may not respond. If I have the bandwidth, I'll respond to you. If you don't hear from me, check the Facebook page. That'll be up to date.
And to me, I always feel guilty with saying I may or may not respond. I'll say, I need to know that a relationship is okay if I don't respond. That's how I phrase it. I just need, and because you're asking for that support as opposed to I just put something on you. This is how you can help me, as opposed to this is how it is. Does that make sense? Like, that works for me. Renee has something.
We have a thing in the chat too
Okay,
for
read it.
in a minute. Oh, how do you have these conversations with your loved ones without hurting them? I'm a counselor. A lot of my closest people often come to unload on me, and I don't know how to tell them I can't take their stuff right now. So people,
Yes. No, and that's
outer
good.
rings.
That's like, I have to say this to people too, because I will do this at the grocery store where the checkout person will just like tell me everything that's going on in their life. And like, I have people just tell me stories all the time, and my kids are kind of used to it, but I also have to say like, hey, Miss Talking right there. Like, what you have to say, I can tell is like super important, and I really care about you. And I'm telling you this because I cannot fully be present with you right now. Because I cannot, I want to give this the attention that it deserves. I can't, I don't have the capacity right now. When things get easier, I want to come back to this and then legit come back to it later. Like, give yourself a reminder, whether it's like a Google task or something, like come back to this. But the reason that you aren't there with them to carry it is because you're not the same level of counselor that you are in that moment. You are not, if you're a professional counselor, you are not a professional counselor at your capacity at that moment. So you're also giving them a crappy counselor. Like, I don't know how else to say it, but I've had to do that too, where they'll call me and say, we have another parent that is about to have a stillbirth, or they're in the NICU or whatever. And I have to say no sometimes, and it guts me, but I've also learned through screwing up of mixing up cases or people or things and not being as present, that they deserve someone fully there, and I am not. Does that help answer it? It's not easy.
I'll also say on the reverse side, having learned this about yourself, is we can give the gift, especially when you continue to be in community with other bereaved parents or other people who have heterotext who are coming into the group, to also, I will start a text to somebody who says, hey, I have no expectation of a response.
Yes.
Please don't feel pressured to get back to me, but I want you to know, I remember Joe's surgery is this morning, and I want you to know I'm thinking of you. And that's the direct text, but you start with, so you're laying it out there so that they don't have to do that. Are we okay?
Yeah.
You're telling them in advance.
Yeah.
I am okay.
Mhm.
Hey, I remember this is, the 30th anniversary of your daughter's death. I'm thinking of her today. I had wonderful memories. This, give out the whole paragraph that says, right at the end, please don't feel like you need to say anything back. I just wanted to let you know, I'm here if you want to talk to me. And if you don't want to talk to me, you still know in that moment, because I think sometimes on the converse, people then get afraid to talk to you. And then you end up in this circle of silence, and then nobody's saying anything because they don't want to say the wrong word. So I found like taking that burden off the person who's in the center circle doesn't do any of that. Can then still nurture your relationship, because then it lets them know, if I want to get back to you 5 days from now, because now I finally have a question, or I don't want to say anything at all, the next time you pop up, I know everything's okay between us.
Yeah, another conversation. Jenna, Nisha. I don't know.
I love this concept of support in a tough house. But I will say you can take it to the extreme. Sometimes your kid needs to know that this is hard for you.
Yeah.
They can feel and you working again and you don't learn. just a brick wall that, yeah, kind of crazy. My daughter is 17, and that's something we have to work through in therapy, is that I thought that I just had to be the strong one for her. I could not step up on her.
Yeah.
But her plea to me was, Mom, I need to know that why that's hard too, because it's hard for me. And I need to know it's hard for you too. So it's finding that balance between not dumping everything on her and being like, I don't know how to do math bills, all the finances, all that, I try not to do that, but find that balance between you're a human and with real life emotions, and your kids need to know that that's okay to express those emotions too.
That's also comfort, actually. So that's the other way to view it as well, is to share with the children that you're having a hard time or that you are scared, is actually comforting to them in the fact that they don't feel alone and isolated in it, but you're not looking to the child to provide you with comfort. Does that make sense? So it doesn't mean that you have to be all positive, because that's worse, right? Like, so one of my kids too said, like, Mom, is Christian gonna die? When he was first diagnosed. Because we just had a friend whose baby was a single ventricle baby that had died a couple weeks before Christian was born. So I couldn't tell my kids that it was gonna be fine, because our friend's baby just died from a similar and less involved condition. So she said, I said, no, I don't know how it's gonna happen. The only thing I have control over is just how we love each other. And she'd always say, we have love, we can love each other. And that's just how we really focus on it in the family, is like, how do you need love? How can I show you love? But to never say that it was going to be fine. So I think that's a really fine line of understanding that, like, comfort and venting is also, I see the underlying difference is that you are not expecting them to help you. So like gifts given with expectations for gifts, they're manipulations, right? So if you're telling someone something and you're expecting something back when you know they're at the center, is not right. But telling them for a reason helps. So like as a peer support person, I walk this really interesting line where I don't share much of my story unless they ask, and then I always say, like, well, what do you want to know? So you can do that with kids or other people. What do you want to know? Because then you can find out what they're really after. And then you can give it what they need. But then I always think, what am I sharing is for them, and what am I sharing is for me? If what I'm sharing with them is for me, I go further up the circle. If what I'm sharing is for them, so they know that we don't have to have that ableism, that's for them. Does that make sense? Do we get it? Please bring more up. Okay. Is there any? Yeah.
I just forgot. I'm not gonna say, especially for like some of the newer families that maybe haven't gotten as deep into some of this yet, but that a lot of us that are in families have experience where with the circle theory, we have realized that there are people in our lives that maybe are only there to take. And I just want to give permission when you are in that kind of situation that you may have to separate yourself from extended family or neighbors or someone else who is making you have to comfort them at a time that you just can't. And a lot of us realize that maybe someone that was important in our lives is not a person that can be good in this situation. And just know that it's okay if you have to like change the dynamic relationship.
Ecosystems change, yes. They're in constant evolution according to what is needed to sustain it. It doesn't have to stay the same. There's nothing like a crisis or hitting, and I shouldn't say crisis, let's be honest, chronic, long-term that drains you, to realize that some relationships aren't reciprocal. And some relationships you were putting more into than what you were getting out. And like Jen said, I give you permission to stop exchanging energy with that And there's like this really cute book, I'll put it in my updated slides, but it was at Costco and it was talking about like love and heart and relationships. And it said that like a window or door that's closed can be open again later. And my heart doesn't always have to have walls around it, but sometimes I need to protect myself. And it was just this children's book that I was like, in Costco, like, yeah, that's exactly how it is. And I think, there are relationships that we have that you have to constantly put in to maintain them with like friendships or family or whatever. But then when you stop putting energy in, it just like, it peters off. Those weren't really friendships, legit. And then there are people that you can just like pick up with years later, and it was like, there's some repair, okay, there's always some repair, or it's like nothing has changed at all. Those are true friendships. We need all friendships on every level, but it also is a gift to be able to see clearly what kind of relationships you have. All right, did I skip anyone else? No, okay. It's really fun.
So what is empathy and why is it
Do the
very
voice.
different than sympathy?
So what is
Empathy
very different?
fuels connection.
Empathy fuels
Sympathy
connection.
drives.
Disconnection.
Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa
interesting.
Wiseman is a nursing scholar
Teresa Wiseman is a nursing
who
scholar,
studied
professions,
professions,
very
very diverse professions,
where
where
empathy is relevant.
and came up with four qualities
qualities
of
of-
empathy.
You don't,
Perspective taking,
Okay.
it's okay.
the ability to take the
It's
perspective of
Brené
another
Brown, so she
person
has
or
her own
recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone.
I know what it's like.
Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least.
Empathetic.
And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage.
Turtle. Again, needs to leave.
John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Beauty.
Thoughts?
I think where you most notice the difference as a person and the receiving end is pity doesn't feel very good, and it doesn't feel like you're being seen. As a matter of fact, what it feels like that is somebody's very glad to not be you. So it's a further into your othering.
Ooh.
Like, you know what I mean? You're being othered even more. And maybe, you know, when someone's doing that, like, oh, like really sucks to be you. But it's coming out across in a way that's like, I'm really glad it's not me, and it creates barriers to understanding. And now you're even less seen, and you're feeling more isolated, and you're feeling more alone, because now you've just been furthered, othered into a box by somebody who's trying to, you know, express this to you, versus an empathy in which there's a connection of somebody taking the time to see you. And who is taking the opportunity to actually try to see what carrying your burden is like, even if they don't have that direct experience, but they're trying to, it's connecting, basically, because now someone is coming alongside you with an ability to reflect to you what seems to be at the core of what you were experiencing. So you can walk away from that experience feeling, even the way somebody says, I'm sorry. Like, just coming from the grief perspective, and sometimes when it comes out that, yes, my child has died, there can be the pity othering way of saying, I'm sorry. And then there can be the person who looks at you and just the way that they say, I'm sorry, you tell that what they're doing is trying to carry a little piece of what that is like to feel. And even though they don't actually know what it's like to feel, they made an attempt. They actually sat there for a few seconds and they held it. And then they looked at you and they said, I'm sorry, with the way that says, I understand to a small capacity what it is you're trying to share. And I think that's fundamentally the difference that I experienced in my life between the two.
I get really frustrated when people are like, I can't imagine. I'm like, try. Ever had something really hard? It doesn't have to be the same thing. Imagine, please.
I remember I think it was the first time I came out, it was when we were in Walmart, Nisha. We were with Tanya, who had lost Rachel. And someone in the checkout line asked us, like, what is this crew of ladies buying all these groceries for? And it was for our board meeting retreat that we were having. And she said, oh, so all your kids have heterotaxy. And Tanya mentioned that Rachel had passed. And she looked at her and she just said, that sucks. And we were like, yes, it does. Like, don't be dismissive. Don't be like fake sympathy. Like, acknowledge the actual pain of that. Like, yeah, that sucks. And she said to us, she's like, that was really validating. Like, it did suck. It still does.
Thank you.
I want to trickle down what they were saying and connect it with what you were saying before, when you're communicating with that child in the middle of the circle. It's important, as a parent, you constantly want to tell them, you're okay right now, you're okay right now. And it's like, there was a point in time where, and even with my littlest one now who has a different medical issue, putting a Band-Aid on a wound was trauma to them at that moment.
Yeah.
Because in my daughter's case, she's already anticipating taking that Band-Aid off, and that is terrifying for her.
Yeah.
And so, and it seems like such a small thing. And then it's like when she got hurt, when people were like, oh no, are you okay? Oh, excuse my language. She didn't want to hear those moments of pity. She did not want, because of what you were saying, it makes her feel isolated, like she is this something different. And I learned, oh, she fell down the stairs. And I say, that was like, it really hurt. What do you need from me? And that's kind of my go-to answer now. What do you need from me right now? And sometimes she'll scream at me, sometimes she'll walk away, sometimes she's just mad that I talked to her at all. And then 2 minutes later, she's like, I think I broke my finger. Can I have a hug? So it's like just giving them that space to process even the tiniest things in the way they need to. It actually takes the pressure off me to fix a situation.
And we are training our children to pay attention to what they're actually feeling. And ourselves, right? We're not suppressing, we're acknowledging it. And there's like a lot of healthy growth that comes in that. Remember, like, empathy drives connection, sympathy drives disconnect. And you got to remember that when we tell them, like, you're fine, you're okay, is because I can't deal with them not being okay, or I don't have time to deal with them not being okay. It's for me, it's not for them. Yeah. All right. So, all right. What I want to do is an exercise, okay? And I think, Allie, can we breakout rooms in pairs, or people that want to do it? And also realize that sometimes people in Zoom may not just be like right in there too. That's fine. But what I want to do is I want you to pair up, and I'm going to give you 3 minutes to just talk. Okay, and one person is talking and the other doesn't say anything. Nod, yes, or kind of acknowledge it, but don't jump back into the conversation. You don't have to share something hard or really vulnerable, but it's just a practice in listening, but active listening where, and you can kind of reflect what they're saying, but you are not putting yourself in the conversation. Does that make sense? Okay, so in the room, pair up with somebody, and then Ally will do magic. Somehow. Want you to think before we answer this. How was that experience for you? And is it easy to listen? Is it hard to listen? Is it hard not to fix? And also flip, think about how it felt to be listened to. For me, it's honestly really uncomfortable to just talk to sometimes, even though I like talking. Where's the people?
They're coming.
They're coming. Oh, they'll come back in.
They're coming. It says 30 seconds.
And
they're
then we only have
coming.
10 minutes, so I'm not even gonna get time to go over the last handout, but I can kind of briefly do it, I guess. Just explain it and then you do it on your own.
It took a minute. I
I know,
can't.
I could talk about things like for days, you guys, and like, there's so much that I didn't get to that I could just honestly just talk to forever and ever and ever. But, okay, I'm not looking at
There you go.
somebody back here. Nope, they're coming out.
They're all coming back here. There they are. Oh, look, they're all on their cameras because they were talking to each other. Thank you.
Yes, they're all back. Oh my gosh. Please, if you're comfortable, I want to see your faces. Because I want to acknowledge that you're here too. Like, you know, because I'm looking at that, but I don't know. So I'm not gonna go to any more slides. So I gave them a prompting ahead of time, so it's not very deep. But I asked them about what it was like to be someone who just had to listen and not fix. Like for me, it's really hard. and what that experience was like. And then on the flip side, what was it like to be the person that was just sharing? I don't know about you all, but I know for me personally, it is hard to just open up and share. But then it also feels really good when they don't fix it. They just listen, which is so weird because that's not how we operate. So let's start with the first question. What was it like to listen? What was easy? What was hard? And what did you experience? That's your questions. And Zoomers, you too. You can respond. Here we got Renee in the room. And since we only have 10 minutes after Renee too, if you haven't spoken yet, I want to hear from you. So I want you to feel like you're here too. Go ahead, Renee.
Yeah, I'll just say, I really appreciate the ability to listen to somebody else's experience. It's nice to have it, you know, that defined uninterrupted time. Because you get to know another piece of another person, and I think that's really a privilege, honestly.
Zoomers? Ooh, Rachel. Can she unmute and we can hear that way?
Ooh, I have to unmute. Let's see.
Okay, there it goes. It told me it wouldn't let me unmute
I
myself.
can't hear.
Wait.
Dang it. Hold on, we're figuring this out. We're technology challenged.
I don't know.
And it's something that mute, like the little drop or arrow next to the microphone. Let's see if it says share.
It's because it's all coming through.
Thing?
It's all coming through the AV here because we're recording.
Okay, Rachel, can you type it out? That's extra. And because
Carry
you
on.
can type it out and you can jump in. Like you don't have to turn it. I want my Zoomers. Jennifer said it's so nice to listen, but also hard because I felt the pull of wanting to say something helpful. Oh, well, true that. Jennifer's just a faster typer, but Rachel, you get it out. You're here for it. Because I talk in space. The other thing that's really important to recognize too is just the power of being there. It doesn't mean trying to say anything. So even when you're listening, and they're not saying anything, just being there is super powerful in and of itself. Oh,
Okay,
just looking up, no?
I've got, where's the thing? I've got it. Wait, I'm just gonna come up here because I'm closer.
Yeah.
So I've got Rachel in the side chat and she says, I was going to say, it's sometimes hard to sit and listen when the other person's experience relates so closely to yours, because you want to jump in and be like, yes, me too. But then you don't want to cut them off and take away from their time and space.
Okay, the last bit was super deep. Does that make sense? That you don't want to take away from their time and space? If you think of it that way, it can help create a check for yourself. That is deep. I'm carrying that with me. In the room, anyone who hasn't spoken yet, do you want to speak? Oh, yeah.
So. Nisha made a funny comment to my parents once that, oh, Nick cuts my ear off, and they looked at her like she was crazy. And I think a lot of it is that last part, that a lot of times I'll say something and then pause just to formulate what I want to say next. And instead of just jumping in and saying something herself, she'll wait. And that's actually kind of a trick that you can do with people to get them to talk, is just not say anything back to them. And it gets super uncomfortable, but then they'll say more and more. It's actually a pretty good thing to do in a job interview if you someone my way to mess with them. But yeah. Like I found that I'll say a lot more if people just give me time and space to do so.
And it's really important to remember that somebody who is in the middle of a hard time takes longer to gather their thoughts about what they're experiencing. And they may not even have the words for what they're experiencing because it may be so new to them. I do phone calls with parents all the time and I just sit there. My trick is I take a drink of water. I have to be really bad after an hour long phone call, but that's what I do is I like to stop myself from talking. I always like take a drink of water. So if you're someone that fidgets like me, I was like, do something so you don't. Okay, we're almost out of time, but what was it like to just share? You can type it, so there's. Oops, Jessica's doing.
I think it's just to fill time while it's more. I can space.
We waited for you now.
It's liberating and nice that someone is giving you the opportunity to share, to say what's in your heart. It makes you feel really good inside, or at least it does for me. Just that someone's there to listen.
That's the gift that you can give.
Yeah,
Like, what can I do for you?
and
We can
sometimes
listen.
that's all people need when they're grieving, when they're having a hard time. It's just someone to say, yeah, it sucks, or just listen to you. I mean, yeah, like Ali said, well, yeah, that sucks. But sometimes, honestly, like for me, a couple times, that was the best thing that I heard from people. That really sucks that you lost your wife.
Yeah.
That really sucks that you had to deal with cancer. Sometimes the most like unemotional responses or things that people say to you are the best.
Okay, in school for my counseling program, one of my professors once said that silence can be one of your #1 therapeutic techniques. I would think about that, especially being a person who tends to talk too much. Yes, I feel that in my bones. It also goes back to my personal belief that everyone has the intrinsic power within themselves to heal. And by letting them talk or work through it, I'm giving them the time and space to figure out that it is within them to heal.
Just about that, and then we
Oh,
go.
Jessica, be vulnerable. That's actually, it's really hard for me too, but also so good to share some of my story and experience with someone that was just actively listening and truly understands. Shoot, we're out of time. Okay, so what I wanted to challenge you is to take this exercise and apply it to our interactions with each other, right? Verbally, comment in the HD, right? And just listening and supporting new parents. and other people that are having a hard time, like always jumping in to fix. Reaching out to people that you see here. It's hard to talk, but I bet you when you just talk to someone that you may not have talked before, if you're like me, you want to talk more later, dude. Reach out to each other, we support each other, we're interdependent. I don't know how to sum up what we went over.
Let's keep it going in the chat, in the group.
Yeah. I said, just keep this going. I think some of the biggest things are realizing that we are caring more than just our individual relationships. We're carrying weight from other levels as well. We are carrying more. And the reason that we struggle is not because we're not strong, it's because we're tired, and we're carrying a lot. And then understanding that like, we are really high risk for developing mental challenges and struggles, but not because we're weak. Same thing, we're carrying more, and you are worth seeking treatment, and you are worth the time because it helps our children, our families, our relationships. And that seeking treatment can also be as simple as like truly connecting with people. It can be going to support groups where they allow you just to talk without people jumping in. It can also be forming groups of people that you can be authentic with, because I talk about masking a lot. So masking, when you choose to mask, can be invigorating. You can have a shallow friendship, like one gal that I work with, she'd go to a nail tech and we just talk about reality TV and all these things and never talk about that she lost her child. But it was just like, she'd get her nails done and she'd like getting her nails done because they were pretty. And it was like a really shallow relationship, but really invigorating because she got to set everything down for a little bit because she masked by choice. But when she was with family or friends or other places, and she had to pretend that she was okay, it completely drained her. So looking for connections where you don't have to mask are essential for getting that energy in. Finding people that can listen, coaching people to listen, also very hard. I don't know. I'll figure it out someday and I'll write a book and be a billionaire here, but that's really it. The biggest thing is that the children are often the center and the focus. And I'm telling you that you are also worth being a center and the focus. So that's it.